Hey everyone, welcome to Be Authentic or Get the Fuck Out. I'm your host, Eric Oberembt. This is the podcast where the only requirement to be a guest is that you are being authentic to who you are. If you're not, I'll shut it down and I'll ask you to leave. Remember, be authentic or get the fuck out. All right, so welcome everybody to the first episode of Be Authentic or Get the Fuck Out. So I want to start off by kind of explaining what the podcast is about. The purpose of this podcast is to have honest conversations with my guests. Maybe that means talking about some shit that you hadn't thought about for a while. Maybe it's get some shit off your chest like a therapy session. I don't know. Maybe it's talking about how the government's becoming a fucking control center and taking away all of our civil liberties on a daily basis. And we should all be afraid of that. I don't know. I don't really care as long as it's real, no bullshit, and that you're the same person on camera as you are off camera. I said in the very beginning when I started this idea that if you're in the room or you're on the screen when we're doing this, and if you're not being authentic, I'm going to shut it off. I'm going to shut the fucking podcast off. It's going to be a little bit more difficult when I have somebody in studio to be able to do that. But we'll try and be intentional about the people that I think I might have to shut off. We'll try and make them our virtual guests, right? So we don't have to have that uncomfortable conversation. So I want to get started. I want to get into it. And I want to introduce my first guest. My first guest is one of my closest friends, Paul Reed. Paul, thanks for being here.
I'm honored to be here, man. Big deal.
Really, really appreciate it. So I think that it's important to have the first episode of what we're doing here with us and with you here, because one of the most important things in my life, and not speaking for you, but I think in your life as well, is talking about roofers in recovery.
Yeah,
right?
That's correct.
I think that our past and our presence and our future have a lot in common. And I think that's probably why we were kind of drawn together and became friends. And I think that talking about our recovery, we get to have this platform out there where we get to talk about our recovery, and people get to hopefully lose that stigma that they're worried about talking about being in recovery or needing help. And I'd like to kind of dig into that a little bit here today so that people understand who we are, right? Why we're here and what we're doing with roofers in recovery, because, the more conferences that we've went to, I think we were both surprised at the confusion.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. Right? So if you wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your past and kind of how you got to where you are now. And then we can kind of delve into how roofers in recovery got started.
Got it. I want to say this before I talk about that though, because I want to talk about this. Do you remember really where we met?
I do.
At Eric Hunter's house.
I remember that.
I thought that, well, boy, maybe I'm old and I don't remember.
No. So here's how I remember it. Where we first met was at a conference, and I wanted to ask you a question, and I had never met you. And I got Pate and MK to tell me when you were sitting at the APA booth, and I came back over and I sat down on the old white leather couch.
Yes.
That Doug had there.
You are correct. But where we really had a conversation was at an APA party in Texas.
Yep.
Because there was 75 people there. We're the only two not drinking.
Correct.
So went from there.
Yes.
But anyway, I'm Paul
Doug
Reed.
was there though, right?
Doug was there.
Doug was there.
Doug was there. Heather.
Doug.
So I guess there was four of us. But Paul Reed, Northwest Roofing. Most importantly though is roofers in recovery. That's really my passion. I've been sober for 14 years from meth addiction. Kind of grew up in the industry. You know how that goes. It's pretty common to drink and smoke weed, and guys like us just always took it a little bit too far. So I installed roofs, for really like the first 15 years of my career. I was an installer, and got into deeper and deeper into drugs. It was just really a progressive type thing. And then when it had me. And so since then, since August 14th, 2007, been sober from meth, alcohol, any mind-altering substance. And over the last few years, especially since, becoming friends with you, really the passion, I'm going to call it the passion to give back to the sobriety, the sober community, and more importantly into the roofing industry that we're in, that's been so good to us, has become one of the most important things in my life.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's kind of the last couple of years for sure. It's kind of dominated our lives.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we have a conversation daily about either somebody that we're trying to get into treatment or somebody that called that just needs help or somebody to talk to. Right.
Well, it's turned into, because originally when we started talking about it, it was like, how cool would it be to take one guy,
right,
get him to rehab, and we'll just put some money together and we'll send one guy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it started.
Yep.
And then it's now into like where we have multiple guys in rehab. Today we have 3 guys in rehab today.
Yep.
That's a big deal.
It's amazing. Yeah. Yep. And I remember, we've told this story before, but like, I remember that specific phone call. I remember, I don't know why, but I remember exactly where I was and where I was driving and where I was going. And I couldn't find the house. I couldn't find the fucking house that I was looking for. And you called and I'm like, what the fuck does Paul want? Like, we knew each other and we were friends, but we weren't like that close. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, what the hell would Paul want right now? And I'm like, well, I'm going to answer it anyway. Fuck this house. I don't need to find it right now, And I almost I think I pulled over actually. And, I had been wanting to start some kind of a foundation in my grandpa's honor to try and, help.
I remember saying that.
Help send people to like trade schools, because there wasn't enough emphasis on people getting into trades, right? Everybody was getting the financial district and whatever else, right? And I was kind of picking your brain about that a little bit. And you're like, well, I want to do this. And to your point, like maybe we could kick in, 10 grand a piece and we could, send one person to rehab. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds like a great fucking idea. Right. And then fast forward 2 years later, and here we are, in the middle of other dramas and figuring out where we're going to showcase our wares and who we're going to help and everything. But it's pretty neat to see how it's come full circle.
Oddly enough, it's a big thing about how you identify, but I identify more with Roofers in Recovery than I do anything in my life. So like when I introduce myself, it's most of the time it's like, hey, I'm Paul with Roofers in Recovery.
Yep.
Like just a natural thing, because that's where I get more happiness, peace, satisfaction, whatever you want to call it, fulfillment. Yeah, big word, that I've ever got in my life.
100%.
Giving back. It's done more for me. Like it's made me want to be a better person.
Yep. I think both of us have changed considerably in these 2 years, just in mindset.
Well, it's kind of odd because we're very similar mindset. And if you would have probably talked to our wives maybe 3 years ago, and we're going, holy shit, like they actually care about some dude they don't even know, across the country. So I truly do.
Right.
I talked to a guy last night at it was 10 o'clock last night. I don't know him. He called me. And I spent 30 minutes on the phone with this guy, but I was all in for 30 minutes from this guy. And it's like, that wasn't me.
Right.
That wasn't me.
And now it's the occasional, could you get off the fucking phone at 11 o'clock?
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that.
So trying to save lives, baby.
Yeah. We're trying to save lives here, honey. Yeah. That's fun. So real quick, just for people watching, that don't know who I am, I guess too, I've got a very similar story. I've been sober for coming up on 12 years now in January. I got sober January. Well, I take that back. I went to rehab in November of 2009. For people watching that, are interested in recovery. I think this is an important part of my story, but I went to rehab in November of 2009 because I was facing pretty significant jail time for a 4th offense felony DUI. I was facing 1 to 5 years in prison.
You wouldn't have done well in prison.
I wouldn't have done well in fucking prison. No. And so my lawyer recommended that I go to treatment. So I went to treatment and I finished it. The first 2 weeks, I was kind of zoned out. I didn't want to be there. And there was a moment while I was in rehab that I had this kind of aha epiphany moment of, I was literally sitting in a lecture. And for anybody watching this, been to treatment and knows, you're sitting in these awful lectures, that nobody wants to fucking listen to.
In a circle. You're sitting in a circle.
Oh my gosh. And And I remember having this moment where I out loud went, holy shit, I'm in rehab. And I looked around and I saw cups on the fucking walls and all this shit going on. And I was like, whoa. And people like heard me and like the room kind of stopped for a second, you know, and then they went back and they're like, oh, well, he's obviously crazy. But I had this moment and I was like, normal people don't go to rehab.
Yep.
Right? Like people that, you know, just drink a little too much don't go to fucking rehab. They don't get 4 DUIs. They don't end up in jail. They're not, you know, flushing cocaine at the precinct so that they're not going to get added charges, you know, on them. Normal people don't do that. And so I made a decision at that point to try and listen, right? As they say, like I was willing.
Yep.
I let the door open a smidge just to listen and just to be willing to suggestions, right? And so I did that. And then I came home. And that's the scariest thing about coming home from rehab, right? Is like, well, now what the fuck do I do?
Yep. Because it's easy in rehab.
It's easy in rehab.
It's easy.
Yeah. You're sitting there and you're in this bubble, you know?
And you're like, we're all going to make it.
Yeah.
We're all 30 of us are going to be sober.
And we're all going to be best friends forever.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know anybody that I went to rehab with.
And the rehab girl that's a 10 in rehab is actually a 2. Don't forget about that part.
100%. Yeah.
She's a 2.
She's a 2.
But she's a 10 in rehab.
Anybody that's been to rehab knows that story.
Yes.
100%. But so I came home and had something happen, right? Just something dumb that I used it as an excuse and I got all pissed off, upset about something, had a resentment, right? Yeah. Resentment's the number one killer of alcoholics. Stupid. Like just something stupid. And I went out with a buddy and relapsed, started drinking, had blow delivered within, you know, an hour of my first drink, and ended up going that whole night, going crazy till about probably 4 or 5 o'clock the next morning, and finally passed out. Woke up the next day at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I remember going upstairs in my little Cracker Jack house that I lived in, and I looked in the mirror and I went, "What the fuck did you do?" And I just looked at my big fat head. I weighed 300 fucking pounds. I was a big fat person. And I was like, "You're a fucking mess." And that was on January 3rd of 2010. So I was still fucked up, obviously, on January 3rd. So I was sober by January 4th, I think, probably. I didn't do any more drugs and drink anymore that day. So, but I was probably sober by January 4th. So that's what I consider my new sobriety date. But you know, my story, I needed that night. Yeah. Right. It's not something I suggest.
You weren't quite done.
I wasn't quite done. And it's not something that I suggest to people to do.
No, you got lucky.
I got lucky.
You got lucky.
Because most of the time that turns into a run.
Yeah. Well, that's what always happened, right? It wasn't, we were that guy that if you went out with friends, because most people will go out with their friends and someone buys some dope or something, you got a bag in your pocket, and like it's gone by 2 o'clock in the morning. You run into that weirdo like on Wednesday and he's like, "Hey, I still have like half of that bag." Right. You're like, "What?" Like, I was out
How the
Friday
fuck do you do that?
At 2 a.m. Weirdo.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And that was why I started selling. So I always had a supply in my safe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I always tell the story. I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur.
Well, that was me.
I bought retail once. That's expensive.
Yeah. I didn't think I was a drug addict because I was a guy that bought in quantity.
Correct.
So I was never knocking at someone's door at 2 o'clock in the morning going, "Hey, you got a 20 sack?"
Right.
So I was the cool guy because I bought quantities as well.
Right. And the gals always wanted to be around you.
Yeah.
Because you had the safe full of.
Well, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'm just saying like that was obviously very well
went
planned
hand
out.
in hand.
Yeah. It was well planned out on my part as well. So I'm just assuming it was well planned out on your part.
Absolutely.
So I love the two people that are in here watching us are the two gals hanging out while we're talking about twos in rehab and making sure that we had enough dope so the women could come around and hang out with us. So,
you know, I weighed 150 pounds, was missing most of my teeth, had sores on my hands and shit. But
so you needed the dope.
I needed the dope. That was the only way anything was going to happen that night.
I love that you were 150 pounds with no teeth, and I was 310 pounds with pizzas fucking everywhere, just laying throughout the house with pizzas and nachos.
It was a different drug. I went to a different drug.
It was. But that's just funny that like we have the same story, but it's like, but it's a different story. You know? So one of the questions that I wanted to ask, and this is something that I'm going to try and ask everybody, okay, is you're busy. You got a lot of shit going on.
Yeah.
I got a lot of shit going on, right? We got a lot of things going on. Why did you accept my invitation to come to this and do this first podcast with me? And why is authenticity important to you?
That's a great question. So like you, I've done a lot of podcasts over the years, and at first, I'll be honest with you, probably did my first like podcast, like say 4 years ago, I don't know, whenever it was. And I was so excited to go do it because it was like, look at me, how cool I am. Like, and I could get up there and I could just be this cool person. And that was like that for a long time, probably a couple years. I've never even looked back at my old podcasts I've done because I don't want to, because I'm embarrassed. I don't want to see who that guy, who I was trying to probably portray.
Right.
I think naturally a lot of it was just natural kind of who I was, but there was a lot of bullshit in there that you were just trying to be like the star of the show and like, oh my God, what if this went viral and like I could be this cool guy.
Right.
And, obviously I think because of Roofers in Recovery, I've definitely changed over the years, but it was a really refreshing thing when you said like, hey, I want to start a podcast. And then, a week or two ago, you're like, hey, would you come be the first guest? Because I was like, that's the type of podcast I want to be, because I could go in there and could go many directions. Like I could probably start crying, I don't know, or I could laugh, or we could make fun of people, or we could talk about Roofers in Recovery.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I could go anyway and like, I'm going to be good with it. And so I was really excited with that.
Yep.
Of just being, I could just come and just be natural.
Yep.
And like, no matter what you asked, what we talked about, like I wasn't going to have to pretend to be anybody else.
Right. So as far as authenticity goes and how you apply that in your life, what's an example of why you think it's important, whether it's in your personal life with your family, or whether it's in business, or whatever? What's it? People like to hear stories. Right. I mean, I literally wrote that down, and because people like to hear stories because they can relate to stories. And is there an anecdote or something that you can think of where authenticity changed maybe your relationship with somebody for the better or even for the worse? Because I've got a lot of stories where my authenticity definitely lost me relationships as well that maybe needed to be lost.
Again, I'm going to have to kind of go a roundabout way here,
okay.
Right? But that's okay because we're in this podcast.
Yep.
With me, it's super important to be the person, like just who I am, right? Because it took me a long time to actually figure out that like it was okay to actually like who I am.
Yes.
Because I didn't like who I was for many, 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 many years. My story was like when you looked in the mirror and you're like, what the fuck did I do? I looked in the mirror and said, fuck, I'm that guy.
Yeah.
I am that fucking guy. So it was just easier just to look away, and because like I didn't like who I was. So even after I got sober, it took me 10 years of like sobriety to work through things and do service work and work with other people to fully actually like and love who I actually was.
And be comfortable in your own skin.
That
was the thing I always talked about.
Right.
It was like I was never fucking comfortable in my own skin.
I was just like, I had to do something. I had to try to be like the funny guy to like make up for all these insecurities. And I, working with Clay, which, you work with Clay, it was to me like I kept waiting for somebody to expose who I thought I was.
Right.
And I'd made up this whole thing of like, oh my God, what if people actually figure out who I was?
Right.
And I'm not that guy anymore, but like, what if people found out about there? And so I was so insecure. And so finally, like the tipping point to me was like, one day I just went in to a deal, like we were having a sales meeting, and I don't know, I think I was in a really good mood for some reason. I just went in, I was just who I was. And everybody left there and they're like, oh my God, that was like the best sales meeting. And it kind of hit me of like, dude, you were just you. Like you didn't go in there and like do all these things. Like you were just you.
You weren't trying to be somebody else, right? Like I don't go into a meeting and try to be Paul. Right. And Paul doesn't go into a meeting to try to be Eric or whoever you're watching on social, right? Because we're all watching somebody,
right?
But the people that are going out going, well, I need to be fucking Grant Cardone, or I need to be whoever it is that they think is the be all end all of whatever. It doesn't mean you can't learn something from those people and take cues from them and, and take some of the things that they're teaching and implement them into your own life.
Right.
But the minute that you, I think that the minute that you start trying to replicate what they're doing,
right,
instead of like emulate or like, honor maybe what they're doing, I think that's when it changes from authenticity to being full of fucking shit.
No, I mean, I've listened, just like you have listened to hundreds of different people.
Right.
We've been to a ton of conferences and all those things. And you grab a little bit of stuff and you're like, man, I want to really implement that in my life. But I always make it mine. Like I own what it is, and it's mine.
Well, you said it just walking up the stairs, right? Like you hang out with somebody long enough and you start to say some of the things that the other person says.
Yeah.
Right. Not on purpose.
No.
You just, or you even start to laugh like them, or you say some of the, have some of the same mannerisms, or, whatever. And I think that's normal.
That's normal.
Right. And hopefully they're the good things. And so I think that goes back to, again, who you're spending your time with and the circle that you're spending your time with. Right. Because if you're emulating and you're doing those things, as long as you're not hanging out with those bags of shit that are doing things that you don't want to do, then at least you're emulating.
Exactly. And how important has like community became to you over the last couple of years? There was always like a community, right? But like all of a sudden community is a big thing.
Yeah. And it means something now.
Well, it does.
And it means something now.
Well, and I don't ever want to get in a situation, I'm going to take that back. I've been in some situations like where I've been to like, say, some of these Washington, D.C. or Liberty University, and all of a sudden I'm around these people that are like senators and all that stuff. I have a little hard time being like truly authentic around those people still, but anybody other than like a senator or like this famous pastor, like other than that, I'm good. But I need to work on that because that's a little like, like kind of hard to be like.
Well, and I don't know, maybe sometimes we get confused because I do the same exact thing. I think I do it around, I'm trying to think. I do it around like teachers. I think because I disliked school so much that a lot of times I'm trying to make sure they know that I fucking won.
Yeah.
Right? Like despite all of their, you're going to fucking fail because you don't like being here and you don't want to learn.
Yeah.
I think that I do that and I'm like, I'll fucking show you. And then I try to be intentional about like learning about other people.
Yep.
But when I'm in those situations, I catch myself talking super fast about me because I want them to fucking know how good I'm doing. And like, I made it, Dr. whoever the fuck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I hate that about myself too. Like I need to work on that.
No, it just hit me. It hit me. So
yeah,
that's
I need to do that too. So we're being yelled at that we got about 5-7 minutes to wrap up here. But one thing that I wanted to make sure that we touched on was I think it's really important. There's a lot of rumblings out there in our industry.
Yep.
Right. There's a lot of different camps
for
whatever reason. Right. There's a lot of different conferences. There's a lot of different, somebody said it this morning, cliques, right? Yep. There's a lot of different little groups. And I think sometimes we do get tied up in a lot of that noise, right? And a lot of that shit. And normally I don't care, right? I'm Switzerland. You do whatever the fuck you want. I'm going to do whatever I want.
Right.
Paul, you do whatever you want, right? Like as long as it doesn't affect me and my family or my checkbook, I really don't give a shit what you do. Right. However, more recently, our nonprofit in Roofers in Recovery has gotten some interesting attention from different groups and from a positive side and from, I don't want to call it a negative side, but just maybe it's questioning. Right. And I would like to I'm going to put it out there again, because I don't fucking care. Anybody that wants to sit down and have a conversation with Paul and I about Roofers in Recovery and what we do, you fucking give us a call, because there is nothing that we care about more than helping people. And if somebody doesn't want us at a conference because they think we're affiliated with another conference, which we are not, right? We are not, I will say it on fucking camera now, we are not affiliated with Win the Storm or SVG. Yep. We have been to Win the Storm and SVG. We have helped people at that conference. We've helped people that we met at April Hall's event at SRC Summit. We have probably helped more people than ever by getting to go to RoofCon because of the support that Hunter Ballou and all the people over at RoofCon have given us, which has been absolutely fucking amazing, right? But there are no ties to anyone. And for anyone to insinuate that there is kind of irritates the piss out of me. And you say whatever you want on it, and maybe you want to be nicer than me, but like, I don't care, because this is what I care about. I care about helping people in the recovery space and making sure that those people have a voice and that they're not scared to come talk to us. And if somebody doesn't want us at their stuff, I don't give a fuck, because we'll find another platform.
Absolutely. I mean, it bugs the shit out of me, right? Because it is our passion. Anytime we get lumped into a certain group or whatever, I like what you said, with like Switzerland, we're just here to help.
Right.
We're here to help people. There's no motives behind it. Like it costs us a ton of money, costs us a ton of time. Like, we don't get paid. We don't benefit from it
at all.
Out of our own pockets, do we fly to this place, fly to that place,
We've
stay at a
spent
hotel?
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Of our own dollars. We seeded the foundation to begin with, all these type of things. And it really bothers the shit out of me, when we get through into a group like that is completely, almost, I'm going to say, anti-roofers in recovery anyway.
100%.
And it's bullshit.
Yep.
And what we're doing right now, I want to throw this in, is because when we talk about like who we are as people, we're pretty good. I don't know, I'm going to say we're chameleons, but like we fit in where we need to be.
Yep.
Right. We fit into where we need to be. But there comes a point where we're finally like, fuck this place. Like, it's not good for us. It's not good for what we're trying to do. And like, we're going to be over here.
Yep.
We're going to be that beacon over here.
Yep. Yep.
And that's important.
And I think we close that with, and we are always going to be here. No matter fucking what, no matter what anybody wants to say, wants to push, what agendas anybody might have.
Yep.
I don't care, because I know that what we're doing is genuine. What we're doing is honest, and it has integrity, and we give a shit, and we're not going anywhere. And if people want to, give us an enema and go through it and find out what we're all about, I don't give a shit. That's fine. We'll be there, and we'll be standing at the gate.
Absolutely.
Ready for it, right?
Bring it on.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, Paul, thank you so much for being here. I know we need to wrap up. Again, our favorite word is intentional.
Yes.
Right?
Love that word.
It's our favorite word. And so I'm trying to be intentional when doing this podcast, because I want to keep it to a 30 to 40 minute flow, because I know that you lose interest with people after about 40 minutes, and they start to check the fuck out, and then they won't get to the good stuff at the end. So I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to shut her down. You have to promise that you'll come back.
I want to come back, because I want to take the full 30, 40 minutes and just get into some shit.
Yes.
But I think it was so important to get this with the Roofers in Recovery
Yeah.
of who you are. You're going to be the one doing this podcast weekly, or I guess weekly.
I think we're going to do it twice a month.
Twice a month.
Yep.
You're going to be the one that's doing that, but I think it's going to be important to come back and really just dig into some stuff. But the Roofers in Recovery had to be out.
Yeah. And when Pate's on, we'll zoom you in.
Yeah.
So we can have that battle.
Let's do it.
Since I think he really wants to be part of our cult, as he calls it.
He's getting closer every day.
Too. Yeah, I think so too. So, all right, guys, thank you, Paul. Thank you for being here. We're going to wrap this up. We look forward to seeing everybody in a couple of weeks. And the way that we'll end it every week is, remember, be authentic or get the fuck out.